Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 31. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank those of you who have liked, shared, and commented. Your support allows us to continue to bring on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guests today. I also want to thank Cerberus Strength for bringing you this episode today for free. Owned and operated by active lifters, Cerberus is trusted by the top strength sport athletes and lifters in the world. Cerberus's wide range of products are made by athletes for athletes, truly living up to its moniker, made by the strong for the strong. From sandbags, training gear, and supplements to lifting straps, knee sleeves, and more, Cerberus Strength provides the highest quality strength products on the market, designed and manufactured to help you defeat, destroy, and devour your competition. So if you're in the market for the highest quality strength conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to use promo code STRENGTH_game at checkout to receive 10% off your next order at cerberusstrength.com. And in this week's episode, I'm joined by another fellow Iron Hoya alumni, good friend of mine, Coach Chris Tex McQuilkin. McQuilkin is the Director of Training and Education for Power Athlete, a worldwide strength conditioning organization focused on empowering performance. Chris has led over 100 clinics across 16 countries, spanning 6 continents, introducing the Power Athlete methodology to athletes, sports medicine professionals, performance, and sport coaches. He has coached and implemented programs for tactical athletes, including Naval Special Warfare and U.S. Army Airborne Corps. He has coached collegiately at Georgetown University, Marymount University, as well as interned with the University of Texas football program. Chris is currently based out of Austin, Texas, creating online education content and traveling to lead in-person clinics covering athletic development, barbell training, and speed development. A former collegiate lacrosse player himself and a 3-year team captain at Marymount University, McQuilkin is still an avid lifter and is ever refining his craft to better impact the coaches and athletes he works with daily. Like I said, I'm excited to have him on the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Chris McQuilkin. What's going on, everybody? I'm excited today. I'm joined by a good friend of mine, another fellow Georgetown alumni, Iron Hoya, of course, but also D3 All-Star. Joining the pack today, my good friend, Chris Tex McQuilkin. What's going on, dude?
A lot, but I'm excited to join you, Nick. We blocked out a big time block here because we have much to discuss in our pre-show, probably about 25 good minutes of conversation, but that's just for us.
Oh yeah, I think we could always do that. And I think this year we probably won't be able to catch up. I'm definitely not going to CSCCA. So
yeah, I'm out on that as well, but maybe next year.
Yeah. So, well, we definitely do this often enough, but I think we should do it more often. But hey, for the audience, we're going to hop right into it and kind of get right into your strength story. So how'd you get involved in the strength game? What's your training look like? What actually sports did you play growing up? And what you're kind of currently doing now? Because you're, I would like to say, a movement explorer. So let's give a little synopsis on that stuff for us.
Yeah, I started lifting weights in 7th grade as a product of Houston, Texas football. And football is life, as many of you may or may not have seen the television series Friday Night Lights. I am more of a fan of the movie Friday Night Lights and the book in which it's based off of, because high school is not that dramatic. And we grew up, all I knew was lift weights, run as fast as you can, and then play your sport. That's what we did. And it is an interesting experience because you're just listening. All you know and trust is your high school old ball coaches. We were not a good football program. Katie Taylor, west of Houston, our crosstown rival, won the state championship every year, and we get our dicks kicked in 60-0. So it wasn't competitive, but you played for your boys. That's just what you did. And we would listen to our coaches. We had an interesting experience growing up in that the grade above me, I graduated in 2004. So the 03 Fighting Mustangs, they got sick and tired of getting their asses kicked, and they started to experiment with steroids. So we were all lifting, but then this pack and crew, in order to be competitive, explored steroids, but they were other sport athletes, baseball, so on and so forth. So the dudes that really got into it, they got terribly injured because they didn't know what they were doing, and then not seeking the proper guidance and advice. Like, I don't promoting this at all, but they still weren't getting the right things they needed to. And then like Division I baseball scholarships were thrown away because their shoulders were ripped. And our football coaches decided to take a different approach to weightlifting. We started doing overhead squats, actually bringing in hang cleans versus the full on, if you can imagine, the nuttiest, widest catch in your power clean, just crap. So every high school disgusting thing, we were aiming to find a solution so that kids would stop getting hurt. And then I found myself a phenomenal overhead squatter versus the rest of the crew. Incline bench came into effect, a lot of dumbbell work. We still did not have a pull-up bar or rig at the high school. I don't know how it is now, but I would certainly hope we could get some pull-ups in there back then, but it was still a pretty switched on strength and conditioning program that I had fortunately lucked into. I didn't get along too well with the football coaching staff, and neither did my grade. So again, like I said, we were perennial losers. The coaches decided to take the 05 class and then put them on varsity with those 03s. And they decided they're just going to neglect the 04s, my boys, because they wanted to give the 05s 3 years of varsity experience and hope to stand a chance against Katie. Little do they know, they run into Andy Dalton, future NFL rock star that continued to kick our ass. But we 04s, my boys, my crew, we felt we were winners. We felt we were leaders and neglected, and someone was deciding our performance for us, and we didn't like it. So what we did, 10 of us decided to start a lacrosse team, knowing very little about it, maybe 10 total teams in Houston, Texas. And we just started this thing up. And the rest is history. That opened the opportunity for me to play a college sport. All we knew was lift weights, run as fast as you can, and play your sport. And we were athletes, so we picked it up pretty quickly. 5 of the 10 of us went on to go play some form of college ball, which led me to Marymount University, D3, East Coast. And I walk into the fitness center versus a weight room. But all I knew growing up, lift weights, run as fast as you can, and play your sport. So I went to the head coach, figured I got a squad. I need to do this. And we were able to connect with the assistant coach, who also coached at a local high school, Lacrosse. They were ditching old rusty squat rack away. We got the oldest weights they had. We got the rack. We got a single barbell. And then I was just inviting kids, or saying, hey, I'm going to go after the calf. I'm going to go lift. And created a barbell club for the former football players on our lacrosse team, mostly the defense, and created this be the hammer mentality. If anyone that follows Power Athlete HQ, interestingly enough, I actually got the Hammer Award for my team for the hardest hits during the season. And now that we see this awesome social media presence out there, just some kid using his head as a weapon back before it was frowned upon. And the weight room started there. And that was my first coaching experience, whether I realized it or not, was aiming to set these kids up. But what did I know? Whatever the hell my old ball coach told me, and just put them in the best position for my limited communication to say, hey, just do this. Some guys were able to execute. Some guys fell out. I turned into captain of the team based off this weight room and opportunity. and certainly had plenty of reps to work on my leadership during my athletic career and bringing and motivating and pushing the team to turn into a weight room culture unit. Weight room is not part of the lacrosse culture, unfortunately, like it is football. And that was my aim for a long time, especially with my team and then beyond. Wanted to be that representation for how lacrosse could turn into a weight room culture and sport and make many more opportunities for all these young bucks that may not have the stick skills, but can use their heads as weapons. A kid, but that was the goal. Following my athletic career, I had the opportunity to become a grad assistant coach with my Marymount team. I had a lot of, I'll split this into two. I had a lot of questions and downfalls as an athlete, meaning I could bench press 315 pounds. I was squatting 4+, and I was still getting overpowered. I was still getting outrun. I was still getting just backed down. I played short stick D midi. I was still getting backed down by a midi and just dunked on the goalie. I remember an instance, a moment where I gave up a goal just on the doorstep, and my goalie grabbed my face mask, pulled me into his and said, "I've seen you bench 315. Get this guy off of me," and just pushes me away. So what I was doing and busting my ass in the weight room was not transferring to the field. Then I had kids that never invested their time into the weight room until they were seniors. We all know that. Or they just never found the weight room. But hell, they could rip at 100 miles an hour. They could, I'm thinking of one tackman in particular, could get caught on defense just through the flow of the game, but then stand guys up and do what I was unable to when I saw that he failed to bench press 185 pounds. What? So I had all these questions in my mind, and at the time it made me angry because I was not seeing the transfer of my training into the field, but still busting my ass. Now, my first opportunity of coaching, still these questions are flowing through my mind. How does my hard work not go to the field? I'm not going to make this mistake with my team now. I hit the recruiting trail before my first practice of coaching, and similar camps, club ball experience, you go, you watch, you get a whole list of guys, you shake some hands to some other coaches. Hey, where you at? You're talking, you grab some beers after. And I recall very vividly that I was sitting next to a coach and then like taking notes on this kid, like, yeah, it's going to be awesome. And the coach asked me like, hey, where are you from? And I say, Marymount University. And he says, awesome. I'm Notre Dame. We're getting that kid. So he did me a favor by saying like, hey, don't worry about taking notes or recruiting that guy. He's already coming to me. I'm Division I, fucking awesome. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know how to scout kids. I don't know what I'm looking for. What's good to me probably looks good to you, but at the same time, you got the big swinging dick that is Notre Dame lacrosse. What am I doing? So had this imposter syndrome moment before I even coached a single practice or a single game at the college level. And I'm thinking, how can I motivate or how can I make an impact with my team as a coach? The weight room. Lift weights, run as fast as you can, play your sport. I will take up the lifting weights and running as fast as I can. So ask my head coach, who, you know, we had a great relationship. I could do whatever I wanted. And he was like, yeah, go for it, man. So took on and created time slots for athletes to come train. Like I said, fitness center with a squat rack. And we didn't have a lot of weights for overhead strength. My first session as a strength coach, coaching this team up, strength and sport coach, I'll add, I needed to develop upper body strength. So I asked the kids to kick up into a handstand. In Marymount, we have this giant wall on our back field, like for wall ball. I asked our kids to kick up into a handstand, and then they're holding, and they'll never forget this, but one of the kids goes down, and I run up. And my only experience coaching is Texas high school football and some D3 lacrosse. So not the best coaching, I will say that. But this kid falls down, and I run up to mother F him, get in his face, you weak, you know. And that was a wrong approach because he literally couldn't lift up his arm. he had tore his rotator cuff. So these were my former teammates. They were still my friends, but now they were my athletes. And I put them in a position to get hurt because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I took away his last season of lacrosse. That cost him what? So I just had this sinking feeling in my gut of failure, like even worse than giving up goals and failing as a defensive midi. Like it led to a hunger of understanding. I needed a coach. I needed to find out how to become a strength and conditioning coach. I can't make an impact as a lacrosse coach. I failed already on day one as a strength and conditioning coach. What am I doing? Got on the Google and I found John Welborn. This is September 2009. John is the CEO and founder of Power Athlete. At the time, he was leading a seminar for CrossFit to teach sports-specific application of CrossFit. I know what that sounds. We're more than welcome to get into that later on. But found John, checked out the workouts. It was hard. It was heavy. It was fast. He played football. Okay, this is what we're going to do. So I spent my last dollar as a grad student, bought my ticket to Oakland, California for the next scheduled seminar. That's across the country from Arlington, Virginia, and spent 2 days with two coaches that essentially would skyrocket my career as a professional and a strength and conditioning coach. And this moment that really set my mind off, and we'll get into it, is this concept of posture and position. So imagine now I'm sitting in front of this 300-pound ex-NFL lineman as a 5'7", 185 kid that thought that was the biggest, strongest fish in his pond. And then I'm looking up at this dude talk to me about weightlifting. And the posture and position is when the light bulb went off and I was able to sit up straight and just not get over this star syndrome and really listen. The concept of posture and position as it stands for an offensive lineman and how we can connect the weight room to the field. This is Welborn's example, and I can use lacrosse as well. But John played offensive tackle. His responsibility is to deepen the pocket. So defensive end, the freak, Javon Curse, is lined up on the side, or freaking awesome, J.J. Watt. I'm a Houston Texan guy. So J.J. Watt's lined up against Welborn and aims to then shorten the pocket. So Welborn has to keep his toes forward and keep stepping back and back and back and back. And J.J. Watt's objective is to shorten that pocket so he can put an inside move on or round the corner around John and then get to the quarterback. The concept or the misstep for an offensive lineman would be stepping in the bucket. So you go from a toes forward position, like I'm stepping back, deeper, deeper, deeper. But then I step my toes out, I rotate my hips, and that the defensive lineman can get around my hips, shorten that pocket, and get to the quarterback. He would lose his position on the field. And how we would then use and train in the weight room, all right, we're going to see how much we can load up on my back or pull from the ground or be explosive and catch and maintain my proper athletic position. So we're using the squat, we're using the power clean, we're using all these tools to challenge our trunk, our posture, and our ability to maintain our limb position as taught by our sport coaches on the field. And that just completely blew my mind up. It wasn't about numbers. It wasn't about more. It wasn't about pressing and fighting for 320 out there, right? It's okay. We're going to find different ways to challenge and maintain posture and position. The light bulb went off for me, I feel, because I played lacrosse and defense. Imagine I'm defending you. You're standing in front of the goal. The goal in lacrosse, 6 feet by 6 feet, perfect square with a little wiener kid in there. That's a goalie. Now, my objective as defense is to push you to the right or the left. As I ride you down the alley and push you in one direction, that 6 by 6 gets smaller, 3 by 6, 2 by 6, and then you have that's a very small window to take your shot with a little person in there. Now imagine that I don't do my job and I'm pushing you down the alley and our 2 by 6, 1 by 6, all of a sudden you do a roll inside that 2, 3, 4, 6x6 with a little person inside, that opportunity is created because I lost position. And then I lose my battle. Now this made complete sense. And we can get into toes forward squatting. It's one of our most debated topics in this whole thing. But that was an existential moment. Mispronunciated that, but doesn't matter. It was this earthquake moment for me. All the light bulbs went off, and I realized that training is a means to an end. The end is your performance, period. If what I'm doing in the weight room is not carrying over to the field, the court, the rink, the track, anything, it's all for naught. It's nothing. So that blew up, and paired with Wellborn on this seminar was a man named Rafael Ruiz, hands down my mentor, very fortunate run-in on that weekend, and then later on in my professional career. And just how he would be, his presence. He owned the room. He was shorter than me. I said I was 5'7". He's shorter than I am. And he's stronger than a lot of people within the room. Certainly not stronger than Wellborn, but the fastest. He played Division I football at Sam Houston with Benny Wiley and a couple other coaches in the biz. I can't recall right now. But needless to say, presence, his intelligence about the body, how it worked, and then his professionalism. I asked him questions. He was able to, even though this 24-year-old kid is asking him pretty stupid questions, but he was able to give me the time a day. And then most importantly, in the final piece, and I would argue the most important, was the emotional quotient for a coach. This is your ability to relate to an athlete. It's your ability to control the mental and emotional state of an individual or a team, and then create what he refers to as the psychology of discomfort. And that's everything, man. How are my guys and girls reacting to when the going gets tough? Are they snapping back to the refs? Are they throwing their hands up? Are they falling down on the soccer field, right? Or are they fighting for position, because that creates more opportunities? And that was it, man. So he refers to that as PIPE, and you'll see it's an acronym, PIPE, P-I-P-E, PIPE Pledge. And man, that just blew my mind. The fortunate thing is I had 3 more years of coaching this Division III. They were in the CAC at the time. That does not, or at least Marymount's not in there. I'm not sure if it exists or not. But the CAC, so Salisbury, Stevenson, York, St. Mary's, all of these teams are top 20 teams. And Marymount was down towards the cellar. I had 3 years with this team, the squad, to learn how to coach. I had a lot of eggs to break to make an omelet, fortunately. Like I mentioned, the kid I injured previously, fortunately, no other injuries, but at the same time, I made a lot of mistakes. I recall how I would set up and teach these kids to deadlift, and I would kick my own ass if I listened to myself back then. So, dude, 3 years with a team that was not that athletic to learn and to understand how to communicate, coach, and the best thing that I had was the practice field. I had my weight room time, and then I had the practice field. So then if I'm speaking towards something in the weight room and I know, hey, well, just like I asked you to set up on the, line up on your face off, that's the foot position I want to see here. So the things that I was directing and communicating with them on the practice field, I was able to bring into the weight room. What we were talking about in the weight room, then I could later bring into the field. And especially that emotional quotient in developing them and creating this swagger and this attitude at a team that, unfortunately, man, we were not that successful on the field. But hell, I'll trust any of those guys in a freaking bar fight. And that was the mentality. And we were able to create a camaraderie and a team that should not have won any games. But damn it, we were able to pull some together and create lifelong friends through weightlifting. Man, from there, fortunate opportunity to jump to the Georgetown University across the river from Marymount and begin the dedicating. I knew I was a hell of a lot better strength coach than I was a lacrosse coach. So went all in with strength and conditioning from our boy, Mike Hill, who a girlfriend at the time set me up for an interview because she was Mike's former athlete. So fortunately, I got in the door just through knowing someone. Then, he brought me on to that team to then just assist. And that's where I met the Foster, Hoffman, and many of your crew you had on. All thanks to Hill for the introduction. I'm going to take a breather, man. But that was the start of it. That's where I committed and turned pro as a coach through sport and this itch to understand why I was failing despite my hard work, and then finding that answer to then give to any athlete I ever work with.
That's awesome. No, I like hearing that, because I know we've definitely had conversations about this, especially since our time is very similar. You actually got to play your 4 years and I did not. So as soon as I got hurt, I went to the club side and I just started coaching my friends and roommates. So it was a little bit different, but it's definitely a very different dynamic, and it's a fine line that you have to cross, because within like a snap of a finger, you go from being a teammate on the field, having that same kind of brotherly love, to almost an authoritative figure, but you're still friends with the guys. So it's very weird. And at the same time, you're trying to find your own coaching voice, and it's trial by fire. You're trying to do what you think is best, but you're not really sure how to do it. And you got to experiment as much as possible. And you still did a service to them, even if it wasn't, you'd look back on it and realize that you would never do that again. But I think it's safe to say anybody that has some sort of growth mindset would look back a week from now, a month from now, and in hindsight would change a lot of things from it. And that means you're in a better position and you put a little more thought into it, which is cool to hear. I like hearing all about all the stuff, like your first introduction to Wellborn and Ruiz, because those things that they still preach have just been refined over the years to now when they say it, like it's so quick and repetitive. Like there's a huge purpose behind it. Not that there was in the beginning, but now there's success that you can see. There's more buy-in. There's more coaches that preach the same sort of methodology and principles that he was really trying to push in the forefront. And I think you guys have been a really good like voice for all those different methods and more input where you've been able to add. So those are all awesome things. I kind of wanted to touch on a little bit of the imposter syndrome you felt, because before we were getting going, we were talking a little bit about young coaches and everything. And I mean, we had very different, I think we had very similar kind of coaching bring up. Like we both played, we stayed at the same school we played. So we had that kind of weird dynamic. And since we are Capital Athletic Conference rivals, I won't really get into it too much, but Bury dominates. Salisbury runs table for a lot of stuff. So as you were saying, where the weight room was the equalizer, that was really what was going to help the team propel. It was kind of pulling teeth on my end a little bit for the guys. And I think there was a decent culture that was kind of developed, but I think at the end of the day, they kind of already were intrinsically motivated to lift because they already knew they were studs on the field. So it was really searching for 1%. Meanwhile, you were searching for 99%. Like, let's get as much as we can because skill wise, we're a little bit lower. With that imposter syndrome, like feeling for young coaches and maybe even yourself at that time, well, what do you think kind of took it over the edge and kind of made you feel a little bit more comfortable in your skin to actually like get coaching and feel confident in your ability to express what you wanted to get across to the players?
Excellent question. I didn't have an answer. I didn't have an answer until recently, within the last year. And this was one of the courses we put out on Power Athlete Academy. One of the biggest, the revelation, the conclusion, and correction of the mistake that I made in the beginning of my career was that I was trying to get my clients or coaches or teammates to see performance and hard work like I saw it. What I failed to do was then, hey, Nick, how are you seeing this? Or, Kevin, why not? Hey, come check this out. Let's see what it does for you. Now I'm cool. So I didn't put any effort in to seeing it like they saw it and then close that gap. It was all just forcing and trying to convince and pull people to how I saw this and valued it. It didn't work. And 3 years with Marymount and then 1.5 with Georgetown before I would either get frustrated or not find growth opportunities and then seek it elsewhere. So not until recently did I have the revelation of what I should have done. But then you get into the whole wandering thought of, well, if I didn't do that, then I wouldn't have that opportunity, and then so on and so forth. So it was, I got sick and tired of trying to convince people and then getting frustrated when they didn't value the same things that I valued. That was a terrible mindset. Unfortunately, it probably lost a lot of friendships and opportunities, but then the stupid, hard-headed dude that I was created so many more opportunities I'm proud of. 6 continents, 24 international visits, and then the reverberation of over 100 seminars that I've had the opportunity to coach coaches. How many athletes have they worked with? And then I had this reverberation of performance that probably may not have happened if I didn't get frustrated at certain points in my career where I was seeking more. At Marymount to go to Georgetown because, these kids didn't care enough. I need people that are on scholarship that care about training. What? And then you get into that and you're like, what the fuck? I got to pull teeth? Dude, biceps are not that important, bro. Let's get over here. When I should have been like, hey, dingling this little bicep freaking awesome circuit that I created that you're going to only remember versus all the other stuff that we were training. I should have found different ways to gain incentive for sure. And then with the college staff, there was conflict as well because what paralleled my Georgetown career was also reconnecting with John to begin teaching the CrossFit football seminar. And then, you're slumming it during the week, shitty hours. Yes, you get to work out and get some free protein, but then on weekends, hey man, I got to go to Buenos Aires. See ya. I'll be back. And then would get to see all these awesome cities and experiences. And then certainly felt some conflict with some other coaches that had some poo-poo things to say about CrossFit. Awesome. I don't do CrossFit. I'm not coaching CrossFit. This is the sport-specific application of CrossFit, meaning we talk about strength and conditioning that exactly like you're doing with your athletes, but then we put labels on it like rounds, 4 time, or every minute on the minute versus a 3-to-1 rest ratio, or this is a superset. So that was the CrossFit football seminar, taking periodized strength and conditioning programming and labeling it in CrossFit terminology. So when these coaches, these gym owners got a high school athlete, they didn't F up their career by doing formal long metcons of slow, grinding, cyclical movements. They were doing hard, heavy, fast, explosive, change of direction, and a linear progression on their weight training versus just exercise. And then, there was conflict that coaches on that staff couldn't see through that eventually led to my frustration. And I went, this is 2014, just had enough. My aim was to understand. So got Wellborn to connect me with Rafael Ruiz, fucking threw it all away and went down to spend 4 months in Tampa Bay to learn movement, coaching, programming, and all those little things that I took away from the 2 days. I was going to immerse myself. And at that time in 2014, Raf was taking on Ryan Lochte, so training the 2016 Olympic swimmers. and I am the shortest, densest. So right now I'm probably 205, still 5'7". I'm a dense block. I sink. I don't swim. Yep. And had to do all of the training in which we were prescribing to these dudes. And then we had some military cats that, special forces that awesome. I've never worked with this high level a person who's now it's not just their scholarship on the line, it's their life. Okay, let's add that into the dynamic. And then, all sorts of different drown proofing using the pool, the weight room, and Raph was connected to a club volleyball. So what we would do is then teenage girls would finish their practice and then walk over to the weight room blocked off in that club ball unit. And so it was, again, practice, coach. What's the coach saying? Okay, how can I relate to these 14-year-old girls who, in my opinion, is the hardest population to work with as a coach? Everything's going on in their life. It is impossible. I don't wish that upon any coach getting into this and trying to understand. So then it was, all right, I got to connect with these 14-year-old athletes in the sport that I also suck at and can't jump very high. And the girls were taller than me at 14. So all these different challenges faced. And then, your day starts at 4:30 a.m., finishes at 7. All right, see you tomorrow. Anytime we weren't on our training sessions and actively working with an individual, we ourselves were at the track sprinting or on the whiteboard doing lecture and lesson. And yeah, it was grinding for 4 months, but put me in the best position to then really see the matrix and understand movement, athleticism, and also that connection to the athlete to aim to target their emotional response to training. So that way, when the bullets start flying for real, or the person across the dugout starts talking shit and they mean it, it's a threat. Here's how you're going to respond. All these different things, man. So then from there, it hit back up to DC, and I got hired as the head coach at St. Albans School, one of the private schools in DC. Was able to take on head coach responsibilities and then find different ways to communicate now to a different audience. But again, make mistakes. I was there for 2 years, making infinite numbers of mistake of giving too light, giving too difficult. And then the getting to know the kids emotionally, that connection, that relating to a senator's kid. That's probably where the most challenging point came for me as some small town freaking bumfuck guy, Katy, Texas. Like, that was a challenge at the same time. But it was still lifting weights and getting those kids to understand hard work outside of the classroom. Like, these kids are going to Yale, Dartmouth, and all good stuff, but it's getting them to fall in love with the training that, yeah, it was a couple of years there. And at that point, I was still with John, and we grew Power Athlete to the point they could bring me on full time rather than just kick me around the world on weekends. And that's when our education and things really started to take it off, was that. But it was, we're talking, let's see, when did I attend the seminar? 2009. And at that point where Power Athlete was established, 2017, outside more than the seminar. Power Athlete as the worldwide strength and conditioning training and education force was up to that point. Other than that, man, yeah. So it's been a long road to get this far, but it's all with the aim of understanding, and then how am I as a coach and an educator communicating movement to the level that athlete can understand and then apply and use within that rack or the field, the court, the sport.
Right on. No, there's a lot of unpack there. But no, it's cool to hear that just whatever situation you were in, you didn't let it stifle your learning. So you found a way, if it was time to move on, or it just wasn't what was going to be the next thing that kind of fueled your fire, you went on to try something new. And I think that's it's put you in a great position. You talked about it, and I know a big emphasis for power athlete is coaching coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you guys would be in the same position you are in, even with just your athletic background and some of like your work in history. If you hadn't done all the seminars and gone to different countries and worked with different demographics, I mean, Georgetown, like you said, there was kids coming in to lift when I was like finishing up with teams that were dropping Porsche and Ferrari keys in there. And you're like, did, how do you convince a kid that seemingly has it all to buy into hard work and rusty plates and learn how to train and actually work for everything that you can't really justify what you're doing? Like, it might make you a better athlete, but I'm driving around in a car that pays 10 coaches salaries in here. So it's a very different dynamic to like try to get across. And then cultural boundaries, professional athletes, individual athletes, different sports. And then the whole time you're getting in there and you're trying to see how to actually apply those things. I think that's the biggest part. And that's what I really take away from all your guys' courses and everything. And what I really buy into the methodology is because it's transferable strength, it's transferable movements, and it's not that they're separate entities. They're not in their own silos. It's one feeds the other
Mm-hmm.
feeds back into it. And I think that's what gets lost a lot of times. And I've seen it at the lower levels. I see it right now, like in my current position where sometimes I have, like during COVID, I've had 6 teams. So it's hard to even see the application of what I'm doing pay off. Like, okay, we're winning. Is what I'm doing right? Or is it just what the players are doing? Am I doing something wrong and they're winning in spite of what I'm doing? How do you tell if you only get to see one piece of the puzzle? So it's kind of a crazy sort of feeling, but I think it's made you guys really good at being able to relate to coaches who in turn are going to affect more people. And that's kind of one of the things I wanted to touch on next was like what you actually kind of, if you had to sit down and think for a coach's sake and you're going into a course to teach a bunch of coaches, what do you think are like your primary 3 things you're trying to hit on that would determine a successful coach? Maybe they're intangibles that are not necessarily like thoughtfully coached out, that like you're trying to pick point for 3. Or maybe they're just sort of character traits or something like that. What would you say really makes a successful coach, or what you're trying to accomplish when you go about setting up these seminars?
Another great question. And it comes down to a great coach versus a good coach comes down to 3 things in their ability to evaluate, coach, and teach. Evaluate, we go into a weight room and can I assess these athletes without doing the functional movement screen for all 150 people in the class? No. All right, I got to evaluate their limitations, their limiting factors before we do XYZ. I need to evaluate their personality. Or is this a trainable group? Is this a coachable group? Okay, now I'm also need to know my audience. I'm a freaking 5'7", 205-pound white guy walking in here. Okay, what's the culture of the sport? What's the culture of the team? What part of the country am I in? Okay, I need to think about these things for then me to relate to it. Some ways to do that: music, or ask them questions about music. I learned this. I used to do this fun thing where I would go and just spend a week with a pal, and Jim Carizzi at Kennesaw State, awesome coach, was able to stay with him and observe a week of training. And man, music was the big thing. And Kennesaw State's right outside of Atlanta. So talk about the different regional rap groups and crews that are there. And he was able to find out where this kid was from in the city, talking to him about music, poke some jabs versus this versus that. So using music as the connection, going back to the making the connection with the 14-year-olds. Hey, can you teach me how to actually set the ball? So we're evaluating now, what's their mood? Are they willing to then coach and teach me? Okay, well, if they're not, then they're probably shut down and I'm not going to invest my words and time as much as I would with somebody that's willing to, but still keep them safe, So evaluating movement, evaluating the culture, the team, the individual, all these things, and then coach. This is getting them to execute, to shape their movement. Then teach. I would almost put teach before coach, because teach is getting them to set up or understand the why. I mentioned we would get into the squat a little bit. So the power athlete squat, or how we would teach it, would be toes pointing forward with knees set up over your arches. So it mimics your universal athletic position, not too wide where the knee is tracking over nothing, because we don't want to excessively internally rotate or get that valgus knee. And then also the old CrossFit style, we don't want too narrow where our knees leave our toe box. So now I'm teaching them the setup, and I have established a model and an expectation of execution that then I can coach. So I set them up and then I set them free. And then my coaching is my communication, my cueing, my directing, how I finish the set, or how I talk to them to add more weight to then challenge it. But it's shaping, getting it as close to the perfect model of movement for that squat, the step, the lunge that I have in my head, or as my words described and defined during the teaching portion. So I would put teach before coach, evaluate first, then teach. You standing in front of these athletes or an individual, teaching them the movement, establishing the setup, set them free, and then coach as close to that perfection as you can get them. And we all know it will be different for each individual, but we still have it in our eye as a coach. Those three things: evaluate, teach, and coach.
I like it. I like you switched the order too. I think that's go for it.
Final point on teaching, and where some coaches would say coaching is teaching. I disagree. And here's why. If I were to have you, Coach O'Brien, teach the squat to me, Coach Chris, I would have the expectation that you would go through the whole purpose, setup, execution, themes of what you're trying to accomplish, and faults. So you're teaching me that movement. You're showing me you have a full comprehension of what good is, what can go wrong, and how you're going to communicate with your athlete. So then when you're coaching the movement, now imagine I'm athlete, let's just say athlete Mike Hill. If I'm athlete Mike Hill, I don't expect you to teach all of athlete Mike Hill, the whole breadth and depth, but you're going to coach Mike Hill for exactly that change in setup, that exactly correction of his execution that he needs. You're giving the athlete the one thing. When I'm working with professionals like us and Coach Mike Hill, I'm going to teach and show the whole breadth, but I'm only giving the athlete what they need to correct the movement. So set them up and set them free and feed them one thing. The rule of one, that's Nick Winkelman, rule of one, in between reps or in between sets for them to correct. So that's where I would differentiate or delineate teaching and coaching. Teaching, you have this whole comprehension of this movement or the system or the coaching or the program or what you want to accomplish. But then coaching is just the rule of one that they need as an individual.
Yeah, I love that. That definitely makes sense too when you think about it like that. I don't think the athletes necessarily need everything, and that's where you see a lot of people overcoach, and it's either kind of textbook barf where it's just all coming out at once, or it's just like too scientific. And I get it, and we've seen it. I think we've both seen it a lot more in this day and age there. And I don't think it's necessarily just the younger athletes. I think it's people in general. They want to know more of the purpose and why behind it. But that's a teaching part. It's not a coaching part, and it doesn't need to be necessarily verbalized while you're doing the movement. That's a conversation you have after. Maybe not every athlete needs to know the why behind it. Maybe it's just a few poignant ones that want it.
Yeah. And maybe the best athletes on your team, where we selfishly as coaches want to tell them why and all this, unless they ask, Nah, but you will have the gym rats, the kids that want to know more, or the sport coach that involves themselves in the strength program. Hey, lean on them to say why, and then they'll help reinforce. I was always a fan of the sport coaches at Georgetown that would come into the weight room and just take a peek or ask questions because they're doing a lot more. Some teams that I had, coaches did not involve themselves, and I welcomed either questions or participation so they can see and feel exactly why we're not doing crunches, but we are doing side pillars and different, I'm using air quotes to our listeners, ab exercises that are not found in fitness magazines, but have a hell of a lot more carryover and transfer to the boat or the field.
Right. And that's a great point too with sport coaches. And that's why it's really cool to have your unique background where at the same time when you were at Marymount, you were a sport coach as much as you were a strength coach. So there was no delineation between the two. And I think you do see a lot more buy-in, not only with the athletes, but with the coaching, with the strength coaches when sport coaches come in and see. And I think the athletes understand, hey, this actually means something. It's not like, hey, we got to put on a fake smile and think like we're really enjoying it. We're working hard for the coaches to come in. But I think it validates what both sides are trying to do. And it's ultimately for the betterment of the athletes. You want it to carry over. That's the only reason I say sports specific. It's because I'm training a baseball athlete for the sport of baseball. Maybe nothing I'm doing within the weight room is actually baseball specific, but I
Mm-hmm.
know what type of athlete I'm working with. And you said perfectly with the evaluation process, keeping that human element in, understanding the culture of the team. I tell you what, my baseball guys here lift a lot different than they did when I was at Salisbury, or the Georgetown guys do. They listen to different music. There's a different culture than some of the teams we play. Knowing your element, going in to observe as a first year coach, as the next year coach, when you get a new crop of athletes coming in, when you add a quarter, 25% of your team is new, that changes the dynamic of the whole room. And
Oh,
there should be an
everything.
observational period again.
Yeah. And man, if you're a young coach or an intern, don't fucking stand there. Go learn their name or go introduce yourself. Hey, I'm Chris. I'm from Katy. Where are you from? And just, at D1, they're from everywhere. So
That-
yeah, man. And then I don't know, movies, music, freaking everything, whatever. Just aim to talk to them. They don't give a damn about sets and reps. They got their own social and education challenges to focus on. You just set them up and give them one or two things to better themselves.
Exactly. Hey, so you're a little bit on the outside of collegiate athletics, maybe not, you're just not enveloped in it all the time on a daily basis, but you deal with coaches, you deal with athletes that have either played or are still currently playing in college. Like from your perspective, being involved in it and kind of now with power athlete and coaching still, what would you kind of say are some of the biggest like threats or issues that kind of plague college strength and conditioning, or maybe even athletic performance in general? Are there any common themes that you think are trending in the wrong direction that need to be kind of righted at this point?
I mean, the whole with COVID, the college education has shifted, and I mean, in Texas where I am now, we've seen the swing of the trade schools. So almost character and hard work and fundamentals at the younger age are becoming more and more important for then putting kids in a position to decide what they want to do with their career. I mean, outside of that, I can't think of anything. The and like I'm pretty far removed from the college strength and conditioning outside of just catching up with dudes at Summer Strong or having coaches on the podcast and having, but those conversations are focused on what they're doing within their walls, and it's more of the psychology of the creating this bad bulletproof tiger in the kid that they are getting, whether you have Ryan Davis in Maryland or Storms at Florida State. So we deep dive, sets and reps, board, what are you doing with these individuals that you're getting that are, 4.0 GPA, academic All-Americans that then have to enter into the same weight room as an individual who, hey, he thank his lucky stars, he's gotten this opportunity. This is his second, third, or last chance. So you have that wide scope. How do you, as a leader, put these kids in a position to then come together? Those are the types of conversations that we have. Man, other to the scope of college athletics as a whole, I don't know. I just hope lacrosse makes its way to the Big 12 so I can have an excuse to go to a game.
Oh, you're gonna be.
I'll be
praying
waiting
for
a long
time. Yeah. I mean, well, we lost. Did we lose one or two D1 schools this year? Furman got cut.
Furman was cut, and another that I forget. I actually applied to Furman. That's one of the most beautiful campuses I've ever seen. I am so sad for that crew because, man, they had something good going there.
Is it North Carolina? Where is it at?
It is in South Carolina. I'm trying to recall the town, but it's the same town as Clemson.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Stump me on
Greenville.
Okay. I gotcha. The purple versus the orange. Got it.
Well, in the purple and orange. Clemson all day, but at the same time, man, they knew what they were doing as a little private school and made it a beautiful campus.
Nice. Yeah, so we'll see about Big 12, but I mean, I don't know. Hey, Pac-12 is where they need to really get it because now there's the women's. There's a full women's, and actually, rumor is one of our former conference members out here, because my team competes in MPSF, which no one knows about, because it's a water sport like league for the most part. I think San Diego State is going to add on to Pac-12 women's lacrosse, so they'll have 7 teams now, and potentially an 8th if another one of our teams adds on to there. So there's opportunity for the guys to go. I mean, there's club teams all on the West Coast. Berkeley's got them, Cal's got them. All those nice beach town schools have them, and high school lacrosse out there is killer. So,
yeah, and at the moment, Utah is the most far west Division I lacrosse team. It was Air Force, and Denver. I think Air Force was well before Denver established, but
yeah,
we just had Marcus Holman, who's Utah's offensive coordinator and starting attackman for the PLL Archers on Power Athlete Radio. And talking training, that was pretty funny from an athlete's perspective, because he talked about, and I know you know this name, Jay Dyer.
Over at Hopkins. Big name over there.
So Holman's father was a coach at Hopkins. So you had this kid growing up with a world-class strength coach, getting his butt kicked, saying how proud he was of throwing up during all these workouts and all this. And then later on said, like I asked him about the barbell, and he just like, had nothing. But he didn't value the strength coach that he had as a youth, a college level strength and conditioning coach. And I mean, that's just the way it is when we talk to athletes. Like, coaches will never be valued as what they do, apply the X's and the O's. But then he had nothing but great things to say about Jay as a person. And I thought that was hilarious. Like, dude, you're getting world-class training as a high schooler that, fortunately your father is a sport coach there. So he's giving you the skills. You're getting Jay to freaking put the right strength training program together. And yes, I'm sure you threw up a time or two, but what'd you do for your weightlifting? And he didn't remember any of that. Now, as a 30-year-old professional, so I thought, it sounds about right for an athlete. Just, I remember him. He's badass. He's cool. And then the X's and O's, the textbook blob, that the throw up that you mentioned earlier, like, shit, man, that doesn't mean anything. Like, guess what? Here's a secret to you young coaches out there. Everything works. Everything. It doesn't matter what you apply to your athletes. Everything works. They're going to get better if you keep them safe and then plant this seed in their mind that they are the baddest dude to walk through the freaking weight room and onto the field. You're going to set them up for success. everything works, just not forever. You need to find in your approach to tweaking and adjusting things. At Power Athlete, we have concept of athleticism, squat, step, and lunge as different opportunities and movement for the lower body. Then we can tweak different volume intensities to keep our specific goal growing, whether that is size and hypertrophy on Jack Street or athleticism through Field Strong. And then our linear progression for our novice, our high school or first-time weightlifting person, individual, whether they're 18, 25, 30, is bedrock. And that's a linear progression with athletic movements that then puts you in a position to establish a base level of strength, which you will never lose in your life, and then can do awesome athletic things for a long time. So everything works. It's just a matter of fine-tuning the things towards specific goals, or as you have mastered the art of taking what your sport coach wants, doing that, and then undoing it with proper strength and conditioning.
No, it's great. That's a great point. I think one of your recent ones, I'm blanking on this guy's name, who you just recently had on, you suggested to me. He made a great point, and he said something controversial. He said, the program is free, the coaching is what you pay for.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought that kind of ties in perfectly to those sort of things. He doesn't remember the programming. He remembers the coaching, and you hope that he takes the principles with it. And that's perfectly said too, because everything works in strength and conditioning for a finite number of years. So that's where it takes a true expert level coach to meet that athlete where they are, figure out what's the right dosage for them. How long can this actually last? When's enough is enough? When things need to progress. So that's cool to kind of hear Marcus's story as well. Actually had on coming up in a few episodes is the Loyola, Maryland strength conditioning coach, who I was with for a little bit, David Manning. And his first coach when he grew up in North Carolina was Steve Gisselman, who was a longtime UNC strength conditioning coach over there. So he was doing the same thing. He was getting world-class coaching from one of the top D1 coaches in the country as a high schooler, like young coach, and was pretty much none the wiser, except seeing the mega seniors, like all the people that he wanted to emulate growing up. And you see what happens to those players when they get a kickstart like that, and they're empowered and they have great coaching for the long run. Like he's now a full-time coach at Loyola. Marcus Holman is a full-time coach at Utah. You see where those things kind of propel coaches going forward when they have a lot of tools at their access.
Oh yeah. And most value their strengths, which I respect. And I value my strengths as well, but I acknowledge my weaknesses. And that's the sign of, man, that's a great coach that will forever be a great coach. And I feel personally that there's a calling to this profession, and then those that are called to it, challenged, face adversity, but still never leave. That is a true coach, whether it's finding the opportunity to coach your kids little league when, careers didn't go your way, you're still finding a way to educate, empower, and give back. And bottom line, take somewhere where they can't take themselves.
Exactly. Hey, so it's kind of shifting gears a little bit. We started briefly talking about programming and a little bit of how everything works in strength conditioning. You can't really just throw everything at it, because at the same time, we're trying to keep athletes safe, healthy, and performance matters. And you realize when you get to the professional and the collegiate level, wins and losses also get people fired and hired. So how do you kind of currently stay active and explore new ideas that you actually add into your programming? I know I kind of deem you as like an explorer for movements and exercises. There's a lot of things that you either throw away or tweak or kind of put a different spin on that ultimately sometimes get added into your guys' methodology. So how does like your own personal training improve your coaching, and where do you use your training to improve like the programming you guys put together?
Well, it all comes down to how we are communicating or looking at movement. And at Power Athlete, our objective is to unlock athletic potential. In order to accomplish that, we've defined athleticism so that we can train it. Before, it was this mystical thing or God-given touch, and you hear it and you know when you see it. You're watching an NFL game or college soccer, lacrosse, these top tier levels of the sport, and you see a kid do an amazing thing and you're like, man, that guy is athletic. So you know what it is when you see it. Essentially what we did is apply a definition so that it can be broken down and trained. And the Power Athlete definition of athleticism, the ability to seamless and effortlessly combine primal movement patterns through space to accomplish a known or a novel task. And I'll break it down. Primal movement patterns. Primal not as in paleo, CrossFit, loincloth. Primal is in foundational movement. And how we see this, there are 7 foundational movements for the body. We have, and I brought my pelvis. I'll do my best to describe it. I know we're not on video, but we're going to begin with what we generalize as a squat. So imagine I have a bowl of soup, and I'm going to take an imaginary line, and I'm going to place it right through the side of that bowl of soup. For my pelvis model, I'm placing a line through the side of the iliac crest, and it's going to go out the opposite end. And my pelvis will rotate along that imaginary line. It's an x-axis. So my pelvis is tilting forward, it's hinging. And we generalize squat, front squat, overhead squat, deadlift, Olympic weightlifting. All of those, from our perspective of the hip, are hinges. I know some people delineate and have a hinge and then a squat as different movements. We're looking at it as the same action, the same movement of the pelvis. Now imagine that same bowl. I'm going to take a line and put it right through the center, the top of the bowl, and the bowl will twist right to left along that center line. This is the y-axis of rotation and my lunge. So when I step forward into a lunge, my pelvis rotates to the left as I'm lunging through space, if you can imagine. Then the final piece, I have this imaginary line that's going to go through the front of the bowl or right through my belt buckle on my hips, and my iliac crests now will tilt to the left and to the right. This is going to be my step up, my marching, my sprinting. Imagine that high knee up, toe up. That's going to be representative of step up. So those are our 3 lower body foundational movement. Upper body, I'll go quick because it's not very controversial. Vertical push paired with a vertical pull, horizontal push paired with a horizontal pull. Those are the 4. Incline press or dips. Those are a combination of any of those 4. Now back to the lower body where we say foundational. If I'm working with a volleyball player, a pitcher, a lacrosse player, all at the same time, we're still all in our programming going to squat, step, or lunge. If I identify a limiting factor, a limitation, a weakness, instability, or shortened range of motion, some form of a limitation within squat, step, or lunge, we focus on that and write it into our accessory work. But the primary strength training will focus on squat, step, and lunge variations. Now, if they have a problem with the lunge, the step up, I'm not necessarily too concerned with what they squat heavily because we're going to spend a hell of a lot more time in this unilateral lunge or step up position. So if I continue as a strength coach to focus on my axis, my deadlifts, my heavy ass squats, and show my sport coach this amazing spreadsheet of numbers that begin to get fictional, my kids, he's going to know, they're going to know. As soon as they step onto the field, they get found out. They develop this false sense of confidence, squatting 400 plus, but then they can't figure out why they're still getting their ass beat by that kid, that walk-on, that can't freaking hold their water in the weight room because there's a limitation in the unilateral, potentially. So I aim to identify a limiting factor, strength, mobility, stability, competency, coordination, all of that in an X or a Y or a Z. And then we target that with accessory work. Plenty of opportunities, coaches, go to town, have fun with that one. Now, once they begin to have this competent execution, strength, power, speed, stability, mobility within our big XYZ, axes of rotation. Then we can get into transitional movements. And this is one of the ones you referenced in our show notes here, a squat to a step up. Now imagine I set up in a squat and I charge my butt down, but then as I drive out of the hole, I hit a high knee and hold into a stable step up position. I just combined a squat and a step up. And then as I go down, I continue to drop that high knee down right into the bottom of my squat and then alternate firing up the opposite. So I'm doing a squat to step up or a high knee squat, however the hell you want to describe it, but it's a combination now of an X and a Z axes of rotation, a transitional movement. I, as a coach, am overloading this, aiming to try to get as strong as we can just to the Z, the step up weight or the squat. And you try to tell me, oh, you can't, dude, I'll freaking take you to the weight room with me where I'm squatting 400 plus, and then we're going to do squat to step up with 315 and more. So this transitional strength is more representative of sport athletics than the traditional closed chain XYZ movement, right? I'm not poo-pooing on those. Yes, we're going to overload as much as we can because those are the safest tools, the barbell back squat, the deadlift that we have to overload our athletes and drive a structural adaptation. Once we have the musculature, though, it starts to work against us, right? There's a famous write-up in Science and Practice, Zatsiorsky, that talks about these shot putters and their bench press, the time and the effort that it took to bench press more than 400 pounds took away from their shot put distance. Awesome example for us to then apply to a big picture with the money lifts that everybody loves, that you sniff your smelling salts and all that good stuff. But hell, man, we know those people that can get continued to be blown off the line, I don't care what they squat, if they don't have transitional strength. But we need to develop that. So it starts with the X, then the Y, and I won't say then, and the Y, and the Z. Then we provide the opportunity for the athletes to then get transitional strength. And this is where I'm looking as a coach. I'm looking at two things. One, when we overload the X, think rep maxes, 1s, 3s, and 5s if we're in college, 3s, 5s, 10s if we're in high school, no 1s in high school. If we're looking in college, when we rep max, I'm finding when the safest amount of weight that I can put on my athlete, I'm finding where the screws are loose, where the greatest stress that I can safely give to my athletes that will never replicate the speed or the effort or the force on the field, but still the max I can create in the weight room. I'm finding where the screws are loose. Feet, hip stability, maybe some hamstring not firing properly. What's the order or the pattern? Their posterior chain is firing at maximal loads. I'm identifying all these limiting factors and then writing it to my accessory work. Now, when I get a strong X, Y, and Z, I then add stress of combining primal movement patterns, aiming for transitional strength, and I will see the limitations that were formerly on the X, the Y, or the Z reappear. So now these are transitionals is working on where, yes, there is some coordination, some neurological coordination with the X, the Y, and the Z. Now I'm really targeting more neurological limiting factors and coordination than targeted structural with the X, the Y, or the Z. So transitional, I will see that arches collapse or the valgus knee or the things that I thought we corrected through the X, the Y, and the Z accessory work. You will see it reappear once you start to make movement more challenging and combining primal movement patterns or adding space. This is also something neglected by many coaches out there, especially youth, young coaches. There are 3 planes of motion. Stop neglecting them. Sagittal plane is easy. You can overload, you can look cool, you can put it on Instagram, be awesome, cool, awesome. Everything you can do in a squat rack or a door frame, that's the sagittal plane. Sport is played in an infinite combination of X, Y, Z axes through all three planes of motion. Frontal plane, that's stepping to the left or the right, or performing jumping jacks. Frontal plane, then our transverse plane, think rotation. Either my body is moving through space, rotating, or I'm separating my shoulders from my hips as a sagittal plane. Again, I'm going to isolate a plane of motion with a primal and identify a limitation. Then once we shore up that limitation, then we add the stress of different plane of motion or different primal. Sagittal plane, I mentioned the squat to step up. That's a pretty easy one. But now if I go into a wider squat and really have my step up across my body and aim to pull my hips, that's a frontal plane movement, because I'm moving my hips, my body, through the left and the right through space. I, as a coach, am looking for any ACL limiting factors, some external rotation on the stable leg, like the leg that's down. Say my right leg is down on the ground, my left knee is up. I'm looking for internal or external rotation at the hip, both signs of potential ACL injury, which we won't necessarily see in a strong squat, but I add the stress of the frontal plane, boom, what appears? So then I like a kettlebell swing with a lateral step to the left and right. It's one of my favorite ones, very simple, and I can put that into okay, let's see what happens in the frontal plane when they do a high heart rate. Kettlebell swing, imagine I start in my athletic position, KB goes through my legs, and then on my hip thrust, it's not only a hip thrust forwards, it's also a push to the left or the right. But that's also how we teach change of direction. Wherever we change direction, we push. So it starts to connect to other actions that we teach. I can, with that same kettlebell, I can do an open step, which means I'm rotating 90 degrees, a little bit more difficult, but that's how I would add the sagittal plane to the transverse plane to a traditionally sagittal plane movement. Nothing changes about my coaching, still violent hip extension, but now I add, once I step with the open step, toes forward, knee over the arch of the instep, and I reinforce my athletic position through space. And I can see, okay, well, this is freaking 52 pounds, and they're still defaulting to the poor toes out, knees out. I assure you, as soon as the going gets tough, the speed gets in, or fatigue of the third period, they're going to default to toes out. So I'm going to coach the hell up at them, give them the opportunity, and shape, coach cue and program to give them plenty of opportunity so they're landing without thinking, toes forward, knees over arches in step. So that space, moving down to the next progression within athleticism, are known and novel task. Accomplish a known or a novel task. A known task, everything that we can do in the weight room, right? We have a set start and set finish. They listen to our whistle. We were talking before about some tempo work you were doing with your teams, right? That's a known task. You gave them the expectation, and their aim is to follow your whistle for your calls. Known tasks. A novel task would be something they've never done before, but are able to still step properly, toes forward, knees over arches in steps, and accomplish the task. This is a very powerful tool for a strength and conditioning coach. I apply this in the form of tag, ultimate frisbee, or foot tag, something where it's extremely open. They are focusing on an opponent or an external stimulus, not a whistle, not my voice as a coach, but their body is moving through space. They're reacting, and I'm watching their feet, how it touches the ground. What's their alignment? What's their stability? Are they heavy on the ground, meaning they're stuck there for a long time? Well, shit, man, we just did all this plyometrics. We're talking about minimizing ground contact time, but damn it, he won't listen. No, dude, your program is not in a position and you're using the test of a novel task and fun games, play, to see if your coaching, your training, your program is working before they get to practice. And more importantly, before they get to a game. If we set them up for success in practice and they are a trusted, valued member of the team, coach will then trust them to step up into the game. It starts to get dicey when kids in training begin to get hurt, because then they don't practice. And then the kid that isn't mentally all in the training, and we know it, gets the opportunities in practice. And then the coach, the sport coach, has no choice. There's no one else on the bench to put in than this person. And then, hell, we know how they're going to step, how the effort they're going to give, because, you know, the old Navy SEAL the old Navy SEAL phrase, you are, goddamn, you know what I'm talking about,
man. I know what you're talking about.
You don't rise to the level.
You don't rise to the level of your competition. You fall to the level of your training.
Yeah. Don't use that as a soundbite, please. But please keep that whole thing in. But yeah, man. And using this novel task will tell you a lot, because, and I go back to the Carizzi thing, man. He had some fun games in there. And then we would see these kids like turn on. They'd be a whole different person, man, as soon as we got into the games. Now I'm identifying, evaluating as a coach. Hey, this person, they love the games, but I can't get them to buy into the weights. What's up? Is it more weights? Is it me yelling? Absolutely not. Now, how can I gamify the barbell or whatever they're not into? So it's all these different ranges that evaluate, coach, teach, all these good stuff, and that we aim to empower coaches with through this definition of athleticism. And the final note that I'll touch on, I said combined primal movement patterns. That was the transitional strength I was referring to. I just didn't go back, but we started with primal, went into combined primal movement patterns. We added the stress of space, and then finally the testing whether my work is working through the novel task. But that known task, that's set, start, set, finish. Hey, we're running 60s today. Awesome. But I know my soccer team, when they get onto the field, Ben Hoffman, they may run 60 yards, but then awesome. Then my teammate turned it over. I got to turn around and sprint the other way when I only covered 20 of those 60s, right? So the known task is, okay, we're creating this capacity or this ability, or expanding our opportunity. But then the known task, hell, that's practice, and even more so games. But I need to prepare them before those moments, and that's my responsibility as a coach.
I like it. I think I started writing stuff down to kind of compare. It's really similar to what people do when they try to describe change of direction versus agility work. It's all known versus unknown. It's basically set up versus chaos at a certain point. It's structure versus play. Primal movements versus transitional strength, known task versus novel. Basically, it's practice versus application at that point. And I really love what you guys talk about, what you said about evaluating them during that process. And you do see a lot of athletes who are really good. They're switched on during games, but then you slow them down and they can't execute movements. And huge one, I don't know if it transfers everywhere. I've seen it at the two places that I've had wrestling. Wrestlers are notorious for this because they're just switched on. They're in game mode all the time. Everything's fast paced, high. Like, I need to get that hip. I'm going to do everything I can to get it. It doesn't matter. But then you slow it down. You say right knee dives down, left foot step. And they're like, whoa. This is way too slow. But that's what they need. And I found that out with my guys specifically. I was like, we're doing stuff on cadence. I don't give a shit. This is exactly how I want it to look. We need to overload these things because you guys are already switched on all the time. Let's take a step back. We're not going to lose that, but we need to kind of bridge the gap between the two, and you can't just blindly rush through these things.
Oh, yeah. And that's a fantastic approach to take even at the college level. The mistake we see now lower at the high school is coaches doing the exact opposite. We need, and they're effing these kids up. That's why they're coming to you like this. Hey, full speed. How you do one thing is how you do everything. And all those cliche, coach, go, go, go. Dude, movement. Steady is smooth. Smooth is fast. Okay, let's set it up. We can see how they move and transition through space at this speed. And if I see a fault, I ensure you it's going to happen at full speed. And then all of this being said, to all the coaches out there, there is the anomaly that's going to shit all over this. The LeBron James that walks like a duck, heel over heel. And then, oh, yeah, no, dude. Okay, we're not working with LeBron James. It's our job to take the walk-on, put him in the best position to be the baddest person there to then earn themselves a scholarship. We take people where they can't take themselves. A lot of those athletes are going to succeed and make it to the next level despite of the training that you're doing as a coach. Do not take credit for them. What you can do is empower, and when a kid gets a scholarship from a walk-on, you can feel good about that. A 3-star recruit that did earn their scholarship puts themselves in a position when they are called to step onto the field, the court, the rink, the arena, they're able to not make a mistake when the 5-star has to take a play off or a break or a breather. Those are the moments in which the strength and conditioning coach has impact and power. Taking people where they cannot take themselves. Stop taking claim for the people in the professional league that you had the fortunate opportunity to work with by complete chance of the universe. Come on. Who did you develop as an individual? That's the question that I have for many coaches out there. Soapbox over.
No, I love it. I love it. That's seeing the development over the course of time is great. That's why I do. Part of the reason I really do enjoy the collegiate level is, for the most part, I'm going to see him for 4 years. So that's why I really hope the transfer stuff doesn't happen forever. And I can actually sit there and see progress through the course of 4 years, because I think that's more vital to me. That's awesome to hear athletes come back and tell stories of, I was a puny 150-pound kid and now I'm throwing 97 in the big leagues. I was like, that's awesome, because you remember where you started, and that's a cool thing to hear. And I mean, there's always going to be an exception to the rule. So some of those freaks are going to be freaks for a reason, and it's your job to just not mess it up.
Oh yeah. And if you have I'm going to call out Bruce Bowen, who was San Antonio guard in 2013, going up against the Miami Heat during the finals, and you watch him move, one of the oldest guards in the league, and he had the task of guarding LeBron James. Where he would fall to was maybe 1 or 2 steps behind. LeBron had the athletic ability in which he could make a mistake and cover that ground for the mistake. Bowen didn't. But then Bowen was able to buck up, power up, and because of on-point training, he was only able to fall slightly. But then LeBron had this athletic window in which he is undown and had an off day. Our objective as a strength coach is to put our kids in a position that when the star stud that gets all the attention, all the effort from the coaches, sport coaches, I know strength coach, we spread it around and empower everyone, but we're putting them in a position when that star across the field has an off day, we can shine. Or they are not on point and empowering and doing their God-given gifts, our person can shine because they were leaning on the fundamentals. Seamless and effortless movement through space and exactly what they focused and trained on. And they're catching that Tiger Woods, that LeBron on an off day. And it's theirs, that competition. There are infinite numbers of stories of this in sport that are surprise or Cinderella stories. No, those kids, they train for that moment, that time, those kids. There's even professional athletes, I referenced Bowen, trained for that opportunity because they had it in themselves to focus on the little things, where their foot position is, during these transitions, during these games, during these plays, and they listened to great coaches who were investing in them at that moment in time, not who they were destined to be.
Love it. Hey, so I know we got to wrap this up pretty soon. So like any good training session, we're gonna end this off with a good finisher. So we got 4 quarters for you,
Ooh,
4
baby.
questions, and overtime today. So you can answer them rapid fire, or you can take your time on each one. But you ready to rock and roll?
Yes.
All right, first one I got for you. Biggest influence in strength and conditioning and favorite lacrosse athlete.
Let's see. The biggest influence, I'll say Ruiz, and you can find him on Instagram. And every coach that listens to this show needs to follow him. He's got 2 kids that he trains alongside his athletes. They're going to be the future stars of whatever sport they decide to. But Rafael Ruiz, and then his handle is Kaizen ASAP. So Kaizen ASAP. Check him out and just listen. You'll hear that presence and that professionalism that I spoke to earlier just unfold through Instagram. Now imagine that in the weight room, in person. It's something to strive for as a professional. Favorite lacrosse athlete, dude, I got to go Holman, solely because we had a 2-hour session in which we were making fun of him and he was jabbing right back. We're having fun, and I'll follow the PLL this year. And I would say one of the or there's some Georgetown guys that are in the PLL that had the opportunity to work with a little bit. So I'll root for them. But this moment in time, I'll say Holman, just because, and he's number 1 on the Archers. Look for him.
Right. I don't know. I'm looking forward to that this year. I've talked to a few guys, a lot of the ones that I played or trained are kind of transferring out. I hope this league holds up though this year. I want to see it happen.
I love the model. Those that are not familiar, rather than, designated cities where it's like the Fresno Bulldogs versus the Houston Texans. No, it's clubs. And then each weekend, it's only weekend games. They travel around the country with the aim of spreading the sport. So there's Friday, Saturday, Sunday games, similar to the March Final Four for the Division I. It's a big tournament feel experience. They go to Utah, Long Island, DC, all over. But these clubs, they just mix and match the matchups throughout. But all the pros go through and say you're a Friday night team matchup. During Saturday morning, they ask you to give back to the game and teach kids lessons and open up the field. So if you are a parent that's looking to learn about the game, it's fun, it's fast, it's a combination of hockey, soccer, basketball, and the little contact of football if you know how to do it right. And highly recommend check it out if it's in your region. It's great. It's fun. And
No doubt.
They're doing it right, man. Invest in long-term, long con to get lacrosse as the America's pastime.
No, I love the model. I love that model, like actually going back and forth. And I wish D1 would have done it more, like, because usually it's just Foxborough, Baltimore, Philly.
Mm-hmm.
I was really hoping they would open the market up, but I mean, that's why a lot of MLL teams, I talked with David about it more. As soon as they put like that Atlanta Blaze, I was like, this is not going to work. All the East Coast teams crush it because the model they had where they weren't getting paid a lot. So the guys that you had around the area who could practice a lot more often were smacking other teams. Just ridiculous. And I think this is cool because it keeps everybody together, and it's kind of like a show more than anything. It's just designated teams we're playing for. So
yeah,
I'm looking forward to it.
A little soccer model, European, dude, they're doing it right.
For sure. Hey, so what can you be found doing when you're not coaching, training, doing all your courses and everything? What's some of the tech's go-to hobbies down in Texas?
Exploring with cooking. We got a fun little partnership with Stay Classy Meats. So grilling, bison, elk, some exploratory game. John's got some fun projects with us this summer. That's a cool thing with Wellborn, man. He loops you into crazy adventures in which he goes on. So that could be a road trip up to Wyoming or working on this. I drive a 1986 Chevy K30, old military vehicle, so relatively easy engine to work on, even for a novice. So exploring more of that with the aim of just some self-sustainable, normal, everyday person skills, like changing your oil and working on your truck. So that's shit, man. We work a lot, we travel a lot, but we have fun doing it. So outside of that, it's just get into adventures, cooking some meats, and then cranking some gears.
Hell yeah. Hey, so if you weren't coaching in strength and conditioning, what do you think you'd be doing? Would you take it back to lacrosse?
Teaching 100%. I had a health teacher in high school. I couldn't tell you anything that we learned, but every single day he'd walk into his class, and he was a softball coach at Katie Taylor. He'd walk in and say, "Welcome to health," like it was welcome to hell. So finding stupid, quirky jokes like that. I'd be coaching some sport, whether it's football, lacrosse, basketball, just to, I don't know, man, empower the future leaders of America or my community. So it's some form of teaching that needs to involve movement. Just, I love it. It's the ultimate expression of the body. And the longer you stay moving, the longer you're going to live. It's there. So how you move is how you live. How you live is how you move.
There you go. I know you got a little club team down there with the little Rugrats. So,
oh, middle school, yeah, that's an adventure all in itself.
That's awesome. Hey, so if you're setting up an ideal training day for you, what's your go-to music selection and post-training meal? Is it Texas brisket? What's it looking like?
Oh God, I'll take it. The music, the darkness. If y'all recall the hit from 2004, I Believe in a Thing Called Love, they have a hell of a lot more in their catalog than that one hit, and I don't know why they haven't taken off. I've seen them in concert probably 3 times. They're a modern day Queen. They just fucking wail. It's a good time. So that'd be the go-to music on there. There's a mix of that on Power Athlete Spotify channel. We throw different playlists together, either for a podcast guest or just we're bored. And then the post meal, how my daily approach goes. So I live probably about 10 minutes. I'm in a town called Dripping Springs, 10 minutes west of John's ranch. A ranch holds our weight room, John's truck, hobby shop, and then our office, the podcast room. And I prepare all my meals for the whole day. So I got to pack 3 meals. I crush a little breakfast, and then it's some form of meat. Chicken's a often go-to just because it's a lean option. And I'm not as active during the day as many coaches out there that are on the floor. But yeah, so chicken, beef, elk. If I'm gifted some form of deer meat or something like that, venison from a friend that's an avid hunter, I'll take it. But then it's horseradish for sure. And the cool thing about doing a podcast is we get all these awesome nutrition gurus and research and professors on that just say, hey, just do this afterwards. So horseradish, coleslaw, like different probiotic dense foods. I'm trying to remember the Asian version. God damn. I can't remember.
It's not sauerkraut. It's kimchi.
Kimchi, yeah. Sauerkraut as well. So any form of probiotic delicacy, throw that in there because that boosts our little testosterone following the training. And that's usually the go-to. And then carb, so rice, potato to refuel in there. And then I just get a whole boatload of it because I got to eat 3 meals while I'm here at the office before either heading to lacrosse practice or home. So it's, yeah, cooking, man, a lot of home cooking versus going out to eat and then just bringing a whole boatload or a whole crock pot into the office and then just going to town.
Yeah, I've been known to bring the crock pot into the office before.
Yeah, it's not weird. You're weird.
Jobs. Oh, yeah. But it's my smell. You can smell it, but you can't taste it. It's mine. Hey, so last one I got for you. Overtime, most valuable piece of advice you've received. And if you want to share, from who?
I need a minute here. think. I've received a lot of very valuable advice.
Maybe most recent that comes to mind.
Let's me see. The one that's just jumping out in me, not recency theory, but Ruiz again. I've mentioned him earlier at CAC. That was in Orlando. Raf's based in Tampa still. He came up to visit. He and Coach Mack worked together for the Tampa Bay Bucks way back. So Mack knows him very well. So Raf came up, see some old friends and coaches, and CAC was at Disney. If it's ever at Disney, I'm not going back. I'm a fucking coach. I don't have that money. So then we're chilling by the pool, following the whole conference, and his family is playing in the pool, and we're just hanging out, rapping. And I got a pretty great mentor-mentee relationship, and we can talk about anything. And one of the keys that he gave was that he obsessed during his early days of coaching in the craft of coaching in the human body. So he would go to surgeries and see how hands were repaired. He'd deep dive all these different things, finding experts and driving hundreds of miles to spend some time with them in terms of, the brain, the body, the connection, and all of this. But there was certain pieces of the business of coaching that he did not adhere to and dive in and obsess over. So thinking of this and remembering this is a business. You got to protect yourself. You got to protect your family. You got to protect your loved ones while we can, take on this passion project of coaching and the art of coaching. At the same time, yes, we are honing our skill, our craft of communication. However, how are we presenting, holding, and protecting ourselves? So he encouraged me to then deep dive into understanding business, lean startup. This is an awesome book for the layman business individual, but different things like that outside of the scope of this profession. And I mean, if he says something, it means something. So took that to heart and bought some business books. For the life of me, it was difficult. It was like pulling teeth. It was like doing the things that I would ask athletes to do that didn't want to, right? But still had to remember, all right, I have to take this seriously. This was advice. This is not just a throwaway thing. It's a meaningful moment. And found books that I could consume that were business centric. And I found that through basketball coaches. This is unique. This is weird. I don't suggest this. I figured, hey, go into the lean startup. That's a good place to start. But I began with Pat Riley's books, basically taking Pat Riley's coaching philosophy that he fucking won with, and then it would carry over to business. Like he was writing this book for the business professional. So like that's how I was able to force myself in, because the stories, the points, right? It's the magic. It's the freaking, the disease of me, if you've ever heard him talk about that. So finding different ways and techniques for me to then learn these business principles and protecting yourself, that was key. That was huge. So I'll say that to anyone, find your way, don't neglect it. And I mean, I'll recommend that podcast as well that I shared with you, where I spoke with Logan Gelbrick, who owns Deuce Athletics in Venice Beach, California. Very popular entrepreneurial gym mind. And we explained the paradox of a coach. I don't want to spoil it, but bottom line was, you are investing your life in something that nobody fucking cares about. What are you going to do about it?
No, that's great. That's great advice. Coach Mack has talked about that plenty of times too, that you're your own coach and you should treat yourself as a business as well. And I think those are huge things that a lot of coaches maybe either learn too late or never learn at all. But I mean, we kind of know how explosive this profession is. And if you really don't live and breathe it, like that's still not enough. No. You could be out of it in a heartbeat. So you need to protect your investment, and that's yourself too along the way. So no, this has been awesome, man. We'll definitely have to run this back for sure. But in the meantime, how can people follow you, get a hold of some of the programs, all the things you guys got going at Power Athlete, but also follow Tex?
If it's entertainment, go to Power Athlete's Instagram. We got the best branding guy in the planet who's just taken over in terms of cool, badass content. So that's at Power Athlete HQ. And then the hashtags Be the Hammer is awesome because it's just people doing hilarious things or awesome, amazing physical things. And plenty of puppy videos involved in there. If you're seeking continued education, part of my branch of the Power Athlete biz is the Academy. So it's academy.powerathletehq.com. And we have courses that are directed towards the coach and a lot of the concepts of athleticism and movement that I spoke. We also have courses that are directed at the trainer, meaning you're more on the fitness side. It's more behavior change than X's and O's in movement. But at the same time, we talk about programming within there. And I would advise, if you're a strength coach, don't shit on fitness. Have the opportunity to now, okay, well, this could be a possible side hustle that I take on. Here's how I talk and communicate to the general population. So that way I can get a little side hustle going and maintain my performance-centric job. That would be my advice, because that's a lot of fitness mistakes that I go in and talk about. Earlier, I mentioned the confrontation I had with some of the G-Town staff. That led me to this because it was an interesting experience. This is 2014, 13, 14, because CrossFit and the NSCA hated each other. Hated. And here I was. Yeah, politely. Here I was, NSCA-centric job during the week, and the coaches were shitting on CrossFit. And then I would go and travel the world under the CrossFit banner and then talk about, strength performance. And I couldn't. We were not allowed to bash CrossFit. So you just taught strength and conditioning principles, set up execution, squats, reps, all the good stuff. And then can't talk negative about the NSCA there. So then you just go back, and I was in this middle place. And this is where funny, you said Chris Tex McQuilkin as the introduction. Georgetown, it was Chris. Then when I had to go on these gigs, Tex, and, help create this personality, this person to then, come in and have presence in there. Now it's just confusing. Depending on where I am is how I introduce myself. You can't be Tex in Texas. You get your ass kicked for saying something like that. So that's an interesting side note. But at the same time, education, empowering. That's the goal of the Academy. Take you where you can't take yourself, and then put you in a position to understand movement, programming, athleticism, to then create a social intelligence for you then to communicate to the parent, the sport coach, the athlete, whomever you're talking to get them to buy in to your programming. Because as you can attest, social intelligence, everything in this game when getting buy-in in what you aim to do. Doesn't matter what you know, it's how you're able to communicate that. So check that out, guys. Plenty of resources and free courses as well. I mentioned the two big ones, but there's some free education opportunities in there. Then Power Athlete Radio podcast, killer guests every Friday. And finally, my Instagram is just my last name, at McQuilkin, McQuilkin. There is shit I cook, or adventures, or movement that I'm getting funky and creative with that is needs explanation. You'll see movement on Power Athlete HQ. It's just quick hit. Here's what you do, what to do. And then on mine, I aim to over explain so that way I'm teaching coaches that they can then put their athletes in a position to coach them for 1, 2, or 3 things that they may find wrong.
Right on. That's awesome, man. I'll put all the links in there so people can check it out. I'm sure they've already been following along, but I can't thank you enough for coming on. It's great to catch up again and sit down and hash all these things out and bounce ideas back and forth. So it's been awesome, bud.
Yeah, we'll go for the record of time length of your podcast every single time. So next person on, challenge this, and then I'll come back on and we'll just go. I'm Joe Rogan at this point, still holding to go to the bathroom.
Perfect. We'll keep stretching it out and we'll run it back for sure, man. So thanks again for coming on, dude. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
See ya.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors, Cerberus Strength. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.